Explosive video of Dr. Peter Daszak, member of the World Health Organization's international experts group that visited Wuhan to probe the origins of the coronavirus pandemic. Now, China has been desperately peddling that this virus may have originated from the Wuhan wet market theory. But did Dr. Daszak know better? In a 2000 video, he's heard giving details of the kind of research that was going on in China at this institute about manipulation of killer SARS like coronaviruses.
So we sequenced the spike protein, the protein that attaches to cells. Then well, I didn't do this work, but my colleagues in China did the work.
An explosive video of Dr. Peter Daszak boasting about the manipulation of killer SARS-like coronavirus being carried out by colleagues, as he put it, in China. In this 2016 video, Dr. Daszak speaks at a forum on emerging infectious diseases and the next pandemic and describes in detail the research being carried out at the Wuhan lab in China.
Then when you get a sequence of a virus and it looks like a relative of a known nasty pathogen, just like we did with SARS, we found other coronaviruses in bats, a whole host of them. Some of them looked very similar to SARS. So we sequenced the spike protein, the protein that attaches to cells. Then well, I didn't do this work, but my colleagues in China did the work. You create pseudoparticles, you insert the spike proteins from those viruses, see if they bind to human cells. And each step of this, you move closer and closer to this virus could really become pathogenic in people.
This is also indicative of the growing proof of Wuhan Institute of Virology's deep financial and personal ties to US President Joe Biden's top advisor on health, Dr. Anthony Fauci's National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. Peter Daszak heads Ecohealth Alliance, which is reported to have funneled funds to the Wuhan Institute of Virology.
And we went out to southern China and did surveillance of bats across southern China. And we've now found, after 6 or 7 years of doing this, over 100 new SARS-related coronaviruses, very close to SARS. Some of them get into human cells in the lab. Some of them can cause SARS disease in humanized mouse models and are untreatable with therapeutic monoclonals, and you can't vaccinate against them with the vaccine.
Dr. Daszak's Ecohealth Alliance is in the eye of a storm for sending $600,000 US to the Wuhan lab that is seen as the source of the coronavirus. Dr. Daszak is also reported to have organized a statement expressing solidarity with scientists and health professionals in China. The statement read, "We stand together to strongly condemn conspiracy theories suggesting that COVID-19 does not have natural origin," unquote. Dr. Daszak also thanked Anthony Fauci in April 2020 for downplaying the theory that the coronavirus may have leaked from a lab. But with more information filtering out, seeking closer scrutiny of the Wuhan lab, Dr. Fauci too has now called for more investigations.
I do not have any accounting of what the Chinese may have done, and I'm fully in favor of any further investigation of what went on in China. However, I will repeat again, the NIH and NIAID categorically has not funded gain-of-function research to be conducted in the Wuhan.
Just like we did with SARS, we found
Dr. Daszak's 2016 boast about the manipulation of the killer SARS-like virus carried out by his colleagues in China has once again brought the spotlight on the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Bureau Report, India Today. So the spotlight is on the Wuhan Institute of Virology, the place where the virus perhaps originated. SARS-CoV-2 ravaged the world in the last 1.5 years. But the World Health Organization insists that this is more politics and not science. The world body has also expressed its helplessness in compelling China to facilitate further investigations. India Today's Sneha Mordani brings us this report.
Is this the place where the coronavirus originated and leaked into the world? Evidence has been growing each week to suggest that this lab in Wuhan is where the dreaded SARS-CoV-2 emerged from, a secret China is doing everything it can to block from global confirmation. But the World Health Organization, already under steady criticism for pandering to China through the pandemic, has an interjection that the international fingers point at China don't count as scientific evidence.
We would, though, like for everyone out there to separate, if they can, the politics of this issue from the science. This whole process is being poisoned by politics.
The World Health Organization has said, while further investigations are needed, it can't compel China to open itself up to a global probe. A stunning claim amidst a pandemic that has already taken 4 million lives and devastated every single country on earth.
WHO doesn't have the power to compel anyone in this regard or in other regards. And in that sense, WHO doesn't have the power to investigate or enter countries without the express permission and cooperation of that country.
It is true that ever since it was founded in 1948, the WHO has been subjected to laws of sovereign states who can choose to admit their officials or exclude them. But can this legacy policy stand in the face of global devastation, China's hugely suspicious lack of transparency? Above all, if China has nothing to hide, why not allow a full investigation is the biggest question. But even with millions of deaths and uninterrupted global suffering, it's power politics that's at play. China is behind the UK and the US, but still a major financial contributor to the World Health Organization. China's rising financial contributions increase its heft and influence. Cooperation between the World Health Organization and China has been on the rise, be it along China's Health Silk Road initiative or in support of the WHO's goal of universal health coverage of 2030. Taiwan's continued exclusion from the World Health Organization is evidence of Beijing's influence. Throwing up its hands in the face of China's Great Wall of Secrecy, the World Health Organization, meanwhile, notes other challenges.
It has taken years of study in order to be able to even understand the basics of that. We will continue in the second phase to propose the necessary studies to take our understanding and knowledge to the next level.
Earlier this year, a joint international team comprising of 17 Chinese and 17 international experts from other countries carried out one leg of investigations in Wuhan from the 15th of January to the 10th of February. But it's the follow-up that China is now blocking. The World Health Organization also says that this was only part one of the investigations. The studies will continue. The question is whether the next round of investigations will also be looking at the Wuhan lab leak theory once again, given the increasing demands to have a thorough and detailed investigation into this aspect of the outbreak of coronavirus. In New Delhi, Sneha Mordani for India Today.
So is the 2016 Peter Daszak statement an indicator of the kind of research that was going on at the Wuhan Institute of Virology? And is the US apprehensive about rocking China's boat because of the alleged links to Dr. Anthony Fauci's institute? Joining me on India First is Dr. Lee Meng Yan, virologist and whistleblower. Stephen Gaurav is an international development scholar, and Ambassador Ashok Sajjanhar for a diplomatic perspective on the road ahead. Dr. Yan, what does Dr. Peter Daszak's 2016 statement indicate? Dr. Daszak appears to have details of the kind of research that was on at Wuhan.
Hi, thank you for having me. So Peter Daszak's talking not only in 2016, but also in many occasions already shows that he and other scientists actually know that gain of function experiment happened in China. It's an open secret. And that includes they are using different type of new virus come from the animals, including the bad coronavirus. And Peter Daszak keep sending money to China is because he can get a benefit from China by doing this. For example, China helped him to get promoted in the National of Academic of Science. These are already verified in his email. So based on all this, I can tell you still, Daszak, Fauci, or many scientists, they realize this virus is from the lab. It's after gain of function experiment, but they deny for China.
Stephen Golub, there is a huge controversy about US funding research and the kind of research that was on in China. Is it possible that the US did not have details of what kind of research was on despite the funding, sir?
I can't speak with any expertise to that. It does seem that it's not quite the controversy here that it might be in India or in other places, and it's only a controversy here in right-wing circles. Dr. Fauci, for one, is considered really a very reputable source of information and an authoritative voice in terms of trying to combat COVID. In terms of the bigger issue of what went on there, I share, and many Americans share, your suspicions of what China might be hiding. And there's evidence or indirect evidence, such as a US State Department report indicating that the security precautions at this lab were poor. That warning came before the whole COVID crisis unfolded. So we don't know, we may not know for sure what went on there, but there is definitely a grounds for suspicion. In terms of US funding, it was very indirect funding. It wasn't meant to fund this type of research that could increase the capabilities of the virus.
Okay.
So on that count, I wouldn't hold Dr. Fauci or his institute responsible. I think the other individuals you've identified, including the person who spearheaded this effort to totally deny that there might be Chinese lab involvement, your criticisms are more on the mark in that regard.
Fair enough. Ambassador Sajjanhar, Dr. Peter Daszak being a part of that fact-finding body that went to Wuhan, he's also in the eye of a storm for reportedly organizing a statement standing in solidarity with scientists in China. In your appreciation, does that smack of a cover-up as alleged?
On the face of it, yes. Prima facie, it does appear, and whatever report that they have come up with, I think it very significantly reduces its credibility and its reliability, because as has been just mentioned by Professor Lee Meng Yan, and I think this knowledge is quite available quite openly, that he was under obligation. He had received favors from China. So the manner in which he has conducted himself, that is definitely not above board. It's definitely not above suspicion. And the sort of messages, the emails that have come out where he has, very gratuitously, he has thanked Dr. Fauci for saying that, its origin from a laboratory is not very likely, and, thanking him for it. So It does appear that he had a personal involvement, personal reason for, doing all this. Otherwise, if he was just an outsider without really any personal engagement with whatever was going on, I don't think there would have been any need for him to get involved so personally with all that was happening.
Dr. Yan, you claim there is smoking gun evidence of coronavirus coming from the Wuhan Institute of Virology and not the Wuhan wet market. What does China not giving access to patient zero or documents about those who were infected at the Wuhan Institute of Virology before this information became public indicate to you?
China will never let people to go to do the real investigation in Wuhan or understand the real patients who get sick initially in Wuhan, because behind that, this is Chinese Army, People's Liberation Army, and the Chinese Communist Party government. If you went to Wuhan, do the real investigation immediately, the whole world will understand this is not only about the Wuhan lab. Wuhan lab is just one of numerous labs get involved into Chinese long-term unrestricted bioweapon project. And finally going through Wuhan, it is intentionally released.
Stephen Golub, there are reports that seem to indicate that the lab, as Dr. Yan suggests, was being run by Chinese military scientists. Now, in your appreciation, would that be a conspiracy theory that the Wuhan lab was actually working on bioweapons, biological warfare weapons, sir?
No, frankly, no. I think there are grounds to suspect that the leak might well have come from the lab as opposed to the wet market. And as your other guests have pointed out, the fellow who spearheaded the effort to deny it has real questions of credibility. That very letter itself included a disclaimer on the parts of the authors of the letter that they had no conflict of interest. Clearly, he had a conflict of interest. But might there have been some military engagement with that lab? Well, that could be the case in India and in the US as well, where the military may get involved or may conduct experiments or may have concerns or interest in what's going on in a given laboratory. That doesn't mean by any means that this was a bioweapon that was released into the public by the Chinese military or the Chinese government. Lots of reasons to suspect the Chinese government's effort to cover this up, but I really think that there are no responsible accounts out there that say the Chinese military was directing this or was crafting a bioweapon and let it get out and to wreak havoc on the world.
Okay, so you're saying that China may be involved in a cover-up, but not a military involvement in making a bioweapon. And Ambassador Sajanhar, China is one of the biggest funders of the World Health Organization. Will there be, or is this not a conflict of interest? And will this not hamper truth emerging, if at all, ever?
Yeah, the conduct of the WHO so far, and particularly, maybe you know, not only WHO, but particularly the Director General of Dr. Tedros, I think that has been highly suspect, because the manner in which, whatever China was feeding him at the beginning of this, of course, it became a pandemic much later. It was declared a pandemic much later. But the manner in which he, without any investigation, without any going deep into whatever information was coming, WHO and under his leadership, they took everything and they sort of, took it as the biblical truth and shared it with the world. I think there are too many instances available to recount, in terms of whether the virus moves from human to human, when to declare it a public emergency, health emergency of international concern, why delay it so much to declare it a pandemic in March. It was not a thorough job done by the WHO. Okay. And here also it becomes evident that in 2017, when Dr. Tedros got his job, he was also beholden to China. So, yes, his role was compromised, his attitude was compromised, and he didn't really make an effort to go deep into and investigate, which I think any other country, the WHO would have demanded much greater information, much greater access, and much greater investigation before, coming to a judgment. But even on the 11th of January, to say that there is no human, last year, and to say that there is no human-to-human transmission, I think that is what has led to what you said, 4 million deaths that have taken place, because we lost several weeks at the beginning, and people were able to travel to different parts of the world.
Okay, Dr. Yan, you've argued that there are Chinese military scientists who are working at the Wuhan Institute of Virology and other labs in China. Now, be that as it may, how does that prove that this virus came from the Wuhan Institute of Virology, not the wet market, and that, in your view, this was intentional?
I already present the evidence, including scientific ones, and including that the real backbone comes from PLA, the army. and only army owns that virus. And then military and civil scientists have done a series of gain-of-function experiments to enhance it, make it target human more. And all the evidence, actually, I get access even back to December 2019. I have a lot of first-hand knowledge and intelligence to China about this. So what I can tell people is definitely all the leak by accident evidence was excluded, and all the other evidence point to the intentionally release. I hope people can realize this. I'm from China. I know my government better than any other foreigners. These people may be innocent or they don't want to admit. But the fact is, this is unrestricted bioweapon, which is behaved not like the traditional bioweapon to target the world, to destroy your civilization.
Stephen, Gaurav, China is not giving access to details of patient zero or details of SARS-like illness among Wuhan Institute workers in the fall of 2019, or even disappearance of the database. Now, does that strengthen the suspicion that China has something to hide and giving rise to what Dr. Yan says this could well be intentional?
No. Like I said before, there's a difference between suspecting China of covering up, and I think there are grounds for that. We don't know the actual truth, and we may never find out, but there are grounds for suspecting it covered up a leak from the Wuhan lab, and making the leap to say that the Chinese intentionally released this upon the world, killed thousands of their own people in the process, endangered millions more, disrupted their economy to some extent. I just think there's really no basis for that. And if I could put one more factor into this discussion, it's conceivable, and I share your suspicions of China covering this up, but it's conceivable what we have is the natural impulse of an authoritarian bureaucratic state to cover up information. If you go back to when the US disastrously invaded Iraq under George W. Bush, yes, there was the suspicion that there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, yes, because Saddam Hussein refused to release any information on this, refused to let inspectors in. It turned out there were no weapons there in the end, but that Saddam Hussein, for his own reasons, his fear of Iran, trying to intimidate Iran, was just going down a totally misleading and counterproductive, even for him, path in covering that up. I'm not saying that's the case with China here, but let's not discount that when you have an authoritarian regime that just covers things up automatically, they may be covering up something they don't even know the actual truth about, just because they resist information coming out under any circumstances.
Ambassador Sajjanhar, with Dr. Daszak's alleged links, the murky funding of the Wuhan lab, will the US actually want the truth to emerge, or is this an exercise in futility? Is America apprehensive about rocking China's boat?
No, at the moment, whatever I have been able to see, I have been able to hear, I have been able to read, I don't think this is an exercise in deception by the United States. I think the United States really wants to get to the bottom of this, because I think it is too big. It is not, a few individuals, because even Dr. Fauci has said just now that the assistance that was being provided to the Wuhan Institute of Virology, it was not for gain of function research. Yes. It was not for gain of function work that was. And I'm sure there will be documents out there, like all these emails have been revealed. They have been released. So there'll be documents which would seem to suggest. I think the United States definitely wants to get to the bottom of this. It might not really, there might not be a smoking gun, although I hear what Dr. Lee Yan has said, Lee Meng Yan has said, and I think she's very, very persuasive, and I would like to, go ahead with whatever she has said and explore it further, investigate it further. But I think by the end of it, we might be able to get only, very convincing circumstantial evidence. We might not be able to get the scientific evidence.
Okay.
And the other thing, whether it was a bioweapon which was released, it depends all on the intentions. And that you can't really get into the mind of the policymakers, of the PLA and the decision makers in China. But circumstantially, you should be able to prove where it came. And if they did, if, although I don't agree with that comparison with the WMDs in Iraq, meaning if this was the case that was done by China, I think it is a huge crime against humanity. 4 million people dying in the world.
In fact, even a cover-up is a crime against humanity at this point of time.
Absolutely.
But Stephen Gaurav, in your appreciation, is the United States actually trying to get to the bottom of the case, or is this just deflection because there is so much pressure internally? In 90 days, does US President actually want to know the truth?
Oh, I think he wants to know the truth, definitely. I think there's as opposed to his predecessor, Mr. Trump, Mr. Biden actually takes his role as president and dealing with COVID very, very seriously. So yes, whether he'll get the answer in 90 days, I don't know. Barring a really full-fledged effort or full-fledged ability to investigate what went on in China, we may never know the truth. We can suspect things, but it's unlikely that the Chinese government will let real investigators, unlike this, this semi-bogus WHO investigation in there. But I would take President Biden at his word that he wants to get to the bottom of this. As of now, it so happens there's actually a divide within the U.S. intelligence community about what went on there. We just don't know. And even after 90 days, even after using all the resources they have to kind of view this from afar in terms of email exchanges or in terms of certain other developments in China that they may have intelligence access to, his intent to find out is sincere. Whether we will know the truth after 90 days or after 900 days really remains to be seen.
Dr. Yan, we just heard Dr. Michael Ryan, the Executive Director of the World Health Organization's Emergency Medicine Program, and he says the World Health Organization cannot compel China to give access. Given this situation, will the truth ever emerge in the way you look at things, the way investigations are being carried out?
Actually, WHO experts, especially those core team experts for COVID-19, they are manipulated by China. I know. I work with some of these experts. I know how they behave. I know how China behave. And also, I want to tell people is, like you just asked Mr. Stephen, I hope U.S. government can really reach the bottom of the secret of COVID-19. But that depends on how much they really understand China government and understand the People's Liberation Army. As Mr. Stephen said, he thought maybe there is no way that this is a bioweapon. But what I can tell people is, if U.S. investigators don't understand this, the 90 days they won't, most probably cannot reach the real result.
Okay, we'll wait and watch. But Dr. Yan, Stephen Gaurav, and Ambassador Sajjan Har, many thanks for joining me here on India.